Good afternoon, everyone here in San Francisco and those that are remote. It's Thursday afternoon in the security area, so that means it's time for the Security Area Advisory Group, SAAG. I'm Roman Dinelli, one of the SEC ADs, and sitting next to me is
Paul Vautis.
All right, we're going to get started as everyone's filtering in with their coffee and snacks and cookies and vegetables and all the other good things I saw out there. I'm sorry? Oh, t-shirts. Oh, that's bonus. I'm surprised there's so many people here. All right, we can loop. Everyone can make a loop. There's time. All right, so hopefully since it's Thursday, you've already seen it, but we have it here that the note well does apply. It's got a number of key BCPs that apply to how we participate here in the IETF and how we act professionally and contribute to this organization. The key things to reiterate here is that we live by a code of conduct where we engage in productive conversation and respectful to our colleagues, and we focus on the technical work, and we're all collectively working for positive outcomes towards a global internet. Oh, wow. Well, there's a little bit of embarrassment. And the funny part is we've cut and pasted this set of slides for about 4 SAGs, so kudos to you for being the first one to notice. I think this is a little bit like Warren's point about no one checking certificates on the wireless network, given that they've been wrong a couple of meetings. Yeah, this is literally 3 or 4 slides of 3 or 4 meetings of cut and paste. All right, meeting tips. If you're remote, please use a headset. If you can, experience says that that's good audio. Please don't turn on your audio video until you're up at the mic. Everyone else, please use the tool to put yourself into the queue. And of course, if you're in the room, please sign in. There's a clipboard with a QR code that's being passed around. You can click it on it with your phone, or there's a giant QR code if you can zoom in on it on the stage right there. We have a couple items on the agenda. We're going to talk about the standing items, which is the working group reports and the AD reports. And then our 2 special topics is first in our continued series of talking about broad scale adoption of IETF technology, specifically from the SEC area. We're going to hear from Let's Encrypt in the deployment of Acme. And then another topic that we wanted to bring here, really just to get as broad visibility as we can in the security area, is that the IAB is considering a program around identity. If folks kind of remember, a number of years ago, Model T was another IAB program that was spun up to talk about security threats that require really everyone from the security area to think about. I can't think about identity not being such a cross-cutting area, so we wanted to tee this up because the IAB is proposing this and they need your feedback. And then we're gonna have a little bit of time for open mic. I'm gonna pause here. Would anyone like to bash the agenda? All right, not hearing that, we're just going to press forward. Okay, so just kind of some stakes, kind of laying them out here. There are a lot of ways to help out, and we really need your help and participation in running and executing what we do in the security area. If you're interested in being a working group chair, please let us know. We put out a call about kind of twice a year. We have a running list. Come find us after this meeting to tell us that you're interested. If you think that's too much of a commitment, you can help with working group operations, kind of an execution by being a document shepherd. There's always room for that. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later. We have a bit of a backlog in the errata processing kind of in the SEC area. And it's often, I think the numbers say it's more than half is actually not about work that we currently have even open in the security area. So if you can just do 2 or 3, help us verify that would be a huge deal. Okay. So to getting to some of our area updates, we had some changes in where we are, some motion in the working groups. We had a BOF. We had a BOF this morning on detecting unwanted trackers, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about working group updates. We are in the process of chartering the Keytrans BOF. I've gotten a number of questions about what happened there. There was a BOF scheduled for this meeting, but the BOF was canceled. The short story is we followed the same process we have roughly followed for other working groups, where we did BOF 1, and then we did a lot of iteration on the mailing list related to the charter text. And in the Keytrans, we did a lot of iteration. very close to the meeting where we found consensus. And so that charter is now with the ISG. If you did not feel like you got your chance to provide feedback because you didn't hop in on the mailing list discussion or on the consensus call, please wait a couple more weeks. Perhaps it will get through the IESG initial kind of review, and then we'll bring it back to the list to collect feedback and decide where we want to head with that work. And then kudos to I2NSF and SecEvent. They have finished all of their chartered work, and so they were closed since we last met. And in flight, we're also rechartering Lake. There are all sorts of working group summaries on the SAAG list. Thank you so much for those working groups for sending in the report. Typically your chairs, thank you for doing that. We're trying to make this a little more kind of streamlined. We started a couple meetings ago, not to just run through kind of all of them. So we would invite any working group chair that wants to come in, or any kind of participant really that wants to comment on something that happened in the working group or is going to happen tomorrow. We're going to kind of pause here. Feel free to queue up, everyone. Sean, you're in the queue. No one's fighting you.
All right, no one's fighting me. All right, cool. I just want to mention that TLS, we spent a lot of time talking about ECH. We have actually for decades, but we're at the point now where we got some experimental results, and some more experiments are going to be run, and they're available and you can check them out. But the long upshot is, for the draft, the authors are kind of in the mode of closing things out and that aren't going to get done, and finishing up the text like you are for most drafts, but they're planning for a new version by the next IETF. And then we as chairs are really hoping to get it to the ISG sometime in early 2024. The earlier, the better. All kinds of caveats like, hey, we'll make sure that we still got to go through the consensus process, but that's kind of the plan. And the reason why I'm up here is because apparently people ask me about it all the time. So might as well make it as widely known as possible.
Thanks, Sean. Rifat?
Hello. This is just to talk about an OAuth meeting that is happening tomorrow. We have lots of interesting topic related to verifiable credentials. So if you're interested in the topic, please join us tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
And since Privacy Pass is not stepping up to the mic, a couple of days ago, an article in the mainstream media has appeared about Privacy Pass. I forgot whether it was the Washington Post or the New York Times, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, hi, Sean Turner again. One more profit. I guess we got MLS published. So our RC 9420, you can say it however you'd like to interpret it, but it's out the door.
For all the MLS enthusiasts, you may be asked to provide a presentation on deployment at the next SAAG meeting at 118. Okay, anyone from any other working group want to step up to talk about highlights about something that happened in their working group? And Ben corrected me, that has happened, will happen later today. Okay. Oh, Stephen?
Not about a working group, but about the adult BOF. Just a comment. I hope we have another BOF face-to-face, just in order to get such a big crowd again. I think it would be beneficial if we have that many people thinking about it when we decide to go ahead or whatever.
Yes, it seems like a very substantial kind of topic. I don't like to commit to what the next step might be at the end of kind of the first one. We have to go to the mailing list, but it seems like we're going to need a lot of robust conversation on it. Okay, we also have a marker here to talk about things that are security related that are happening really any other place in the IETF, whether it's in the IRTF, the IAB, security related working groups. It's tough to believe that there would be, that we wouldn't want to talk about it here. There's also external SDOs. Pretty much your time to talk about something that's happening in the community here at the mic.
So I'd like to call out some work that's happening in the OpenID Foundation, working on verifiable credentials and kind of making those manageable via OpenID. We've got some stuff in MLS to tie that in and have better identities for folks. Also relates to some stuff that's going on in OAuth this week. So lots of crossover there, but some additional stuff happening in the OpenID Foundation.
Super, thanks. Lars?
Lars Eggert, yeah, there's a bunch of, well, there's some interest from a few people to revise some of the cryptographic algorithms that we use for the nomcom selection process, and that's been brought to Gen Dispatch. And Gen is not the area where that work can be reviewed. So it's not clear to me as the AD for Gen whether there's actually enough energy to do something, and I also don't quite see any sort of alignment between the different proposals. But if people had cycles to look at that and sort of send feedback somewhere, because we're pretty sure we're going to ask you guys to review whether the cryptographic aspects make sense at some point. If we take it forward, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
So, Lars, what list is that being discussed on now?
It's Gen Dispatch. There's also a list eligibility discuss, which could be used for this. So both of them, CC both, I would say.
Okay. Thank you. So, Jonathan, you're in the queue. Bob, is your Wi-Fi not working? To put yourself in the queue, Jonathan's ahead of you, but okay. Jonathan.
Jonathan Hoyland-Klavler. I would have guessed UFMRG would be in the security-related IRTF, not IAB programs.
You made a comment about something not being in the right place.
UFMRG is under IAB programs. It's the second one.
Ah, correct.
But I would have guessed it was security-related IRTF.
Ah. Yes. Correct.
Okay. Please change it.
We will. That one's actually not cut and paste. That was new text. So Bob, then, oh, sorry, Bob, you put yourself in the queue. So Ori.
All right, Ori Steele. Yeah, I just wanted to say, regarding verifiable credentials, and one of the editors of that, some of that work happening at W3C, and simultaneous to this meeting, the Media Man group is discussing how media types are related to the fact that there's work going on, at OpenID, potentially at IETF, and also at W3C. So just eyes on how the media types are related to the cross ecosystem coordination from anyone who is interested in verifiable credentials is very appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Ori. Up.
The NIST lightweight crypto. You should all be aware that NIST did select ASCON as their lightweight cipher. And there was a workshop in June that a few of us here submitted a paper to encourage NIST to narrow the specific modes of each one, like one AAD, one hash, one keyed MAC. And that discussion has been ongoing on the LWC forum. And NIST is saying that they expect to have this done in the next few months. They're moving for an SP800 approach, not going to a FIPS document, but that they will be able to have FIPS certification for it without having to go that expensive legal route of making a FIPS document. So we could have ASCON with specific modes announced by NIST still this year. Thus, at that point, we need to gear up to include those in our protocols. We need to look at how EDDSA will be able to use ASCON. So those of us who are doing lightweight devices don't need to have SHA for that. We need to look at how TLS uses that, particularly in the key derivation function, and how that a keyed MAC of a sponge works compared to how we have traditionally do it with HKDF. So there is work for us here that we need to gear up, and we should get ready for that, position ourselves when this finally comes out and says, here are the specific modes. I mean, there's always a bunch of work we can do now, or we're waiting because we know what will happen. It's just which particular function calls there'll be.
Sounds like it's going to touch a bunch of working groups. Thanks. Okay, so moving on in terms of summaries with regards to kind of personnel change, we are going to see the departure of Kathleen from one of our SEC dispatch kind of chairs. If folks kind of remember, last year we implemented a 4-year rotation system for working group chairs for that particular working group, as it is as kind of a standing body. There's no natural time. for someone to kind of step out unless there's some work-related thing. So we put a 4-year term if that is how long that working group chair is able to stand. We thank Kathleen for being there almost kind of 5 years for us to help us bootstrap all of that work. Paul and I are going to be looking for a new person to kind of step in, and we'll have that announced before we meet in Prague. Thanks, Kathleen. We have a new non-working group forming mailing list that we announced that was announced a little bit at SEC Dispatch. So this is largely related to discussing workload identities in complex multi-service environments. It's called Whimsy. So please join that mailing list if that's something of interest to you. Justin, you want to say a couple words?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for helping us get this mailing list started. It literally just got put up within the last couple of weeks, so not a lot of content yet, but please join the mailing list and please help bring the content. We've got the folks that asked to start the mailing list. We've been working on a sort of a series of use cases. We're going to be publishing that as an ID in the really near future. It's our hope and goal to have a BOF at IETF117. This is actually work that is somewhere between art and sec, and we're not quite sure where it lands, but our plan is to work with all of the ADs from art and sec to figure out who hosts the BOF and kind of where it fits in the procedure for now. And then if a working group does come out of this, then obviously figure out which area that belongs in. But if you're interested in workload identities, identity chaining, and all of that kind of stuff, please join the mailing list. And yeah, once again, it's Whimsy. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed, Justin. So if you have interest in that topic, you have feelings on that, please do drop that on the mailing list. If the proponents are interested in kind of in a BOF, that'll be a strong kind of signal for the ISG to evaluate, how to proceed, whether we should BOF that topic. Okay, there are 5 AD-sponsored drafts to comment on since we last got together. I won't read the specific status. Success, we actually got one to RFC. And then we are very close on another one related to the SSH IANA kind of registries. It's been through ISG review. There's kind of some very small editorial things that need to be done, and that will proceed. And that will help. That will help a couple of other folks that we've seen discuss on SEC Dispatch and SAG that have some interest in modifying the registries in SSH. So that should provide some flexibility. And then to the topic I kicked off earlier, we have a backlog of errata. I will repeat again in name and shame. There's a lot in TLS. There's a bunch in LAMPS. There's a bunch in OAuth, and then there is a long tail, and about half of them are for bodies of work for which we have no active working groups. So we will take contributions in any way kind of possible, and we would ask that TLS, LAMPS, OAuth, ACME, and EMU which have the kind of the largest number, if you could rally all the participants in the working group to figure out what to do with a number of those, that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, sorry, server unreachable. On the previous slide, one of the says no IETF consensus to proceed. Is that a statement of point in time, or is that this is now the end state?
So I actually talked to at least 2 people during this IETF to see exactly how we're going to move forward. So it's not going to be an AD-sponsored document as it stands now, and we're looking at what can be done to not lose the content and value of that work.
Okay. Oh, Rich Sauls, yeah.
Justin Richer. On the topic of errata, I was just going to ask if the note takers can send a link or something in the notes of where we can find all of that errata easily. Because I'm sure it's on Data Tracker somewhere. I can never find anything on Data Tracker.
It's better than that. It's sent to the mailing list.
Yeah.
Is that the only record?
So in fact, no. In fact, it is not in the Data Tracker.
Oh, okay. So that's why I can't find it there.
We will send a pointer to it. It's at the RFC editor site.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, a pointer would be very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. So I just got to say that, great for chairs to do it, but this stuff actually gets sent to the mailing list, and people should feel free to answer as they see fit, and then the chairs can help rally to get the ADs to do the right thing. I've done multiple runs of trying to lower these numbers. It's hard. So hopefully we can all get together and do it.
As you can see, Paul and I have not been very effective. The slope of the line is uphill. All right, just administratively, we wanted to point it out. If folks ever have any questions about what Paul and I are working on, here are the links about what our document load looks like. You want to know where your document is in line. If you want to know where your document is relative to where things are happening in IESG review, there's the link on the telechat. And if you have any recurring issues because you're reviewing documents across the IETF for security issues, we work on this with the sector to catalog the common things that end up being discusses. Please feel free to review that list and propose changes to those things. We typically shop that wiki list, which we call the common sec AD discuss items, with the other areas. We often get asked, hey, Roman kind of Paul, what blocks kind of documents? What could I have people checking? And in addition to all the other guidance we have, we point them to that wiki page. The last thing we wanted to highlight, since we just talked about document reviews, the success of how we run everything after IETF last call really depends on the tremendous help we get from the people listed on that list. Those are the security reviewers. Since the last time we get together at the IETF, they form the backbone of how we take a look at how documents, the quality of those documents for their security considerations before it comes for the last of the last reviews at the ISG telechat. We are profoundly kind of thankful for the contributions and the time that all of these folks have given us. They really make sure that the things published by the IETF are hardened and have been looked at for security issues before they are published. So thank you so much to all of those on the list, and thank you Tiro for organizing all of us in doing all those reviews as the secretariat for the sector. Okay, so with that, we will hand off to the next topic.
All right, hi, I'm Richard Barnes, MLS enthusiast, but also for today representing Let's Encrypt. So,
you can next slide.
Yeah, okay, next slide, please. So I got this email from the ADs a little while ago saying that they were trying to highlight successful adoption of protocols and what I like to talk about ACME in this venue. So I kind of raised the question, next slide, has ACME been successful? So I thought it was kind of useful to ponder for a second, like what makes a protocol successful? One metric, we got a logo. So, if you make a cool enough protocol in the IETF, talk to Greg Wood, he'll hire some designers, make you a logo. That's how you know you've made it in the IETF at least. Next slide. Second, it's kind of cool to collect metrics about whatever it is in the world that you're trying to change with your protocol. Here we had some nice pre-existing stuff that Firefox was throwing off. Firefox was collecting metrics about how often people were using HTTPS. And the objective of ACME was really to make it accessible to get certificates for websites so that we could have HTTPS pretty much everywhere. So if you note the two orange lines here, like when we started ACME, we launched Let's Encrypt in about the same time frame. And between there and when we finished the RFC, made a lot of progress and have kind of held that progress and improved a little bit, depending on how you slice the data. Basically ACME drives the web now. Next slide, please. Yeah, so right now, all of the certificate authorities that drive the web PKI, if you look at their market share, obviously market share differs depending on how you measure it, but this is according to W3Techs. Basically, all of the CAs that drive the web PKI support ACME in some form. Now, it doesn't mean that all of their certificates are issued by ACME, but there's ACME support out there in the ecosystem. Part of the kind of corollary of that is that we've got a lot of software going around this as well. I think one of the things that helps ACME succeed is that it was written with kind of modern tools, made it easy to write software. So there's a bunch of client-side software that you can use to get certificates and integrate it with your services, but also things you can use to operate a server. Obviously, Let's Encrypt's CA software is open source, it's Boulder, but there's also some enterprise stuff as well. Yeah, Ecker.
Yeah, can you just go back to one slide?
Yeah.
So I just want to call out, I think that these, I know these numbers look like they're going down. My understanding is that's a data error. We dug in a little bit. Chrome's numbers look like they're going straight up. I think I don't think the procedure to look at it here is here, but like that like overall number I think is a problem, is not correct. So I think we may have, I think the situation is better than it looks here.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And it's still quite good.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, the bottom has as my favorite new meme, like, so a community volunteer put up this website, acmeisuptime.com, which I thought like kind of actually captured like what we were after with Acme and SRE culture and all whatnot. So finally, next slide. One of the things I really enjoy as a sign of success here is that like people took Acme, like we did it mainly to drive the web PKI and get HTTPS up, but it kind of colonized a bunch of other applications, so Alexi did good work on porting it to email. The STIR working group has been porting it into telephony. Like Apple picked it up for their mobile device management, which I wouldn't have thought. So like this is kind of cool that it was generic enough. We had the right extensibility points that it's gone into these other domains. So I think we got a couple of cool dimensions of success. We kind of succeeded in the thing we set out to do, and it's gotten picked up in some other places and created some value in some other ways. So I'll tick the success box and let's talk about how we got there. Next slide. So I've got 5 different dimensions, things I think contributed to Acme's success. We'll just kind of talk through these. So start off with, I think something that really helped with next, helped kind of accelerate the Acme process is that we shipped it right away. Draft 00 was the basis for Let's Encrypt when it launched, which let us get experience right away from the start of the protocol. So it started building some demand. People started getting certificates from a real certificate authority and operating their websites using it, which meant that there was software getting developed using the draft versions of the standard. Now, that does create a challenge down the line, right? Like you're gonna, the RFC is gonna be different from draft 00. And so you're gonna have a migration challenge down the line. But the insight that we got from Acme is that like, yes, you're gonna have to migrate down the road, but if you plan for that, and you build that into your plans as you're doing deployments, it's not that hard, it's accomplishable, and you get to benefit from all the lessons of running this in deployment as you're developing the standard. So we had a couple of insights going back and forth as we developed Acme from all that deployment experience. Next, please. Another thing we did in the Acme process is take advantage of a lot of prior art that was already out there. So there's a lot of proprietary certificate APIs, manual processes. And a lot of the working group, people in the working group kind of sat down with that prior art and the people operating that prior art and like really understood it deeply and did what they could to pull the right learnings into Acme. And that was valuable as a technical exercise, right? You're technically taking the right bits from the prior art and pulling it into the new thing. But it also had really good community effects because, there's someone who is already doing something similar, who's probably a good adopter of the ultimate RFC coming out. And by going and talking to them and getting to know what they're doing now, you're basically welcoming them into this community and building the community that's going to have a stake in this RFC when it's done. So you also kind of pull in all that knowledge indirectly, in addition to like whatever you pull technically from the existing stuff into the protocol. Next slide, please. Yeah, so extensibility. So one of the things that's cool about how Acme has succeeded is it's gone some different places. And obviously, like the classical thing with the protocol is like, how much extensibility do we have? Do we make, something like verifiable credentials? It's this like work of philosophy and has infinite extensibility in 12 different dimensions. Or do we make something that's like a very specific wire format and just does what it does? I think the balance we hit in Acme was to kind of hit the, have extensibility, but like in the spots that were natural to the protocol and we kind of knew we already needed. So like the 2 key things that I think have let us expand into new use cases are validation methods and identifier types. So we already knew we were going to have new validation methods. This is how you prove you own a domain name because there were multiple things out there in the market already. There's like prove that you can answer an HTTP request, set some DNS records. So we already knew we needed multiplicity there. And so like having that as an extension point was natural to the protocol. And identifier types were similar. When I talk about domain names, talk about IP addresses, those came later. But the idea of having generic multiple identifier types was natural to what we were doing. And so we built in that flexibility to cover the initial use case, but then that also carried us on to a bunch of other use cases. Next, please. something that is, I hope, getting to be familiar to this crowd is the idea of bringing formal models to bear on security protocols. Yeah, shout out to UFMRG. Thank you for your work. Yeah, we found this really useful in TLS 1.3, in MLS. It's getting applied increasingly often. Even in ACME, ACME is unlike TLS and MLS, and it's not really a crypto protocol. It's kind of a business logic protocol. So it's pretty different, but it had some kind of crypto-y bits in it. So we have this external account binding and key rollover stuff that was doing some like MACs and counter signatures, and it needed to fit together the right way. And so we got some formal analysis on that stuff from INRIA that found some bugs, and we fixed them. So like this formal analysis stuff, it's good in building confidence in the protocol when you get proofs of security. It's good at finding bugs when you don't get the proofs of security. I love that dichotomy that either you get a proof or you get a bug and you get something to fix. But also, again, with these community building sort of benefits, much like engaging seriously in the prior art, inviting the formal methods communities in to look at your protocols, like pulls in more good brain power to get smart people to look at the protocol and figure out how to make it better. Next slide, please. Yeah, finally, something we learned even more so after the RFC was this grease thing applies everywhere. It started off in TLS space, adding random bits to part of the protocol that you want to maintain extensibility around, so that someone doesn't expect that you'll only ever see these values. And so like ACME is based on JSON dictionaries in a lot of cases. Like you can just kind of throw extra fields in JSON dictionaries in principle. But people build validation around objects, and might get overly strict and be upset when there's extra stuff there. And that's kind of impeded some extensibility building new stuff into ACME, because we're not sure, or you need to validate before that things aren't going to break before you start adding new things to the protocol. So I think in Let's Encrypt, we've started doing a little bit of this in the live CA, so that we stimulate some failures and get client developers to fix stuff before we encounter extensibility challenges. But this is, a generic approach that makes sense to do across a bunch of protocols. And it's not something that is always obvious to designers in the first run. So yeah, that's my shtick. My 5 points: ship it, embrace and extend, build the community, get the extensibility where it makes sense, validate and grease. Kind of a random grab bag of points, but it seems to have been a pretty good combination for ACME. That's all I got.
Thanks. Philip, you had a question? No, you might not want to go.
I was just going to say that I really like ACME. And one of the things it has demonstrated is the value of automating what might look like a really trivial configuration step. I mean, you only get a certificate once a year. But look at what ACME has now enabled. If we wanted to move to 24-hour certificates, that can now happen. And one of the things that has been the perennial, you can't do that in IETF, is security policy. The only reason for doing DNSSEC was so that you could stick policy, security policy, into the DNS. That's the only reason that made sense to me. The reason that we can't make use of that is we don't have the automation tools, so you can't trust the policy in the DNS. It's just one administrator's opinion could be different from another opinion, and so you can't trust it. If we want to get security policy to work, automate the tasks of the configuration, and then that might get it right.
Thanks, Stephen. And then the queue is locked. So Stephen, you have the last word.
Okay. Hi, Richard. I think ACME is also a great success. I think it's good. I was surprised you didn't comment on part of the reason for that being the crappiness of the web PKI prior to Let's Encrypt. I mean, no, but seriously, as a question, I mean, to what extent was, there were existing kind of obvious pain points in terms of business models and, a crap load of different protocols?
Yeah, I mean, when I first sat down, that's one of the things I was going to highlight about building something successful is to like solve a problem that people care about. That seemed a little facile because obviously everything that one works on, you feel it's important. But yeah, kind of look where pain points are across the industry. I think that can highlight areas of opportunity. And I'll highlight here another thing that I didn't remember to put it in the slides, but I think another thing that helped Acme get traction was that it was built with kind of modern tools like HTTP and JSON, as opposed to a lot of the stuff that came before being built on ASN1 and things that are much harder to program with these days. So yeah, I think solving real problems is an important thing to do, and really kind of aiming big, like, because Acme set out to like change that overall graph of the whole internet. And so that looking at those kind of large scale metrics kind of point you toward those large scale problems where there's opportunity to make a difference.
Thanks, Richard. And again, it's just honestly, it's inspirational to see our technology deployed kind of so broadly. That's in a sense of why we're all here. We want to see that large scale adoption and really large scale kind of change to get, let's remember where we were with encrypted kind of connections and how hard it used to get these certificates and where we are now. So big changes. So it's very exciting. All right, so moving on to our last topic. So we're going to talk about who does. Who? Yes. Hopefully we'll have ample opportunity to bike shed the name too, right?
Okay, Kellen Jennings, I'm going to talk about this for a second, and then Dick is going to talk about it a little bit more. So next slide, perhaps. So who it is, don't get too serious about the name here. The IAB has been considering trying to put together a group of people who want to talk about and think about all the various things going on with identity across the whole internet ecosystem a little bit. And people are going to speak after me in a couple minutes here are going to talk a little bit more about what they're thinking about, some of the things that might be in that. But this is very much just to try and bring a place together where people who are interested in this can get together and think about it. Let's see, you learn more about the program. This slide has whoitis@iab.org. That's not correct. There'll be an email list, I think, at the last one. It's going to be, so the email list to subscribe will get you the right stuff, but it is identity-discuss@iab.org is the correct email list on it. So it's, usual fun with the tool of updating the slides. It's a proposal. It's on the architecture discuss right now. We've been getting some comments on it. We're still thinking about it. And really, this is just a way for the IAB to try and bring together people from outside the IAB, think about what might be needed, what might be useful here in the industry. It's not to develop a specific piece of work. It's just to sort of identify what's going on and where. And then maybe that will point towards some work that needs to be done, but that's not where we're at with that. So I think a much better person to speak about some of the things that we're thinking about will be Dick here. There's several people have contributed to this a ton. Hannes, Pam, other people have mentioned, Chris Wood sort of largely doing it. And I've just been trying to use my best administrative skills to, help manage things around. So with that, let me pass it over to Dick.
Thanks. I just want to call out that I really am impressed with Acme and Let's Encrypt. I know that really moved the needle along. Security and ease of deployment and websites, something that I've done a lot through my career. And now I just build stuff that runs locally that works at times. That was hard to do. Get to the next slide.
And I don't want to interrupt you, Dick. We have the wrong kind of slides up, so we're looking at whether there's something unapproved, and we may cycle it again on you.
Especially for the last slide. So keep going from there.
Okay. I'll just ramble along. I was going to, for those of you that don't know myself, I've been focused on identity for the last couple decades. Spent some time at Microsoft, and at that time led what became OAuth2 and JSON Web Tokens. Spent some time in Amazon and Alexa working on identity things. So a number of, we're good now, things there.
We are not good.
We're not good. Okay,
we're going to refresh.
Okay. And what is identity? I've got a presentation that's 520 slides to try to explain what's identity, right? It's a complicated, large topic. Fortunately, that 520 slides goes by in about 12 minutes. So are we still trying to figure it out?
I mean, are these not?
Oh, that's a slide. Yeah,
well, then
I know
keep
what that
going
is.
with the slides.
Yeah,
there's a
slides are all correct.
Yeah, there's a.
Okay.
So just keep going.
Yeah, well, we're going to go through these quickly anyway, which is kind of my presentation style. So identity is a big, complicated thing. Next slide. There's lots of organizations doing identity work. Next slide. Here's kind of a diagram that Okta put together showing some history, right? So you go back to, I can't even see what it is. I'm going to have to guess like X509 and Radius and LDAP, right? There's many different organizations have created quite a few different types of standards. You know, many of them are still being used, even if though they were created 30, 40 years ago. And there's a bunch of emerging things, right? It's a very big map of identity across many, many orgs. In the, there was a slide up earlier showing like where is some other identity work, and it missed, you know, half of the standard orgs that are working on it. Next slide. And identity is a lot more than authentication. There's a lot of different things that people consider as identity. I had a meeting today and was saying, you know, people don't really know what is identity. I got invited to give a talk at an identity conference in Germany, and, you know, they paid my way, they paid me 10K. And when I got there, I found out that their idea of identity was marketing identity. And it's like, well, okay, you paid me, I'll give a talk, but I'm not sure it's really related to what you guys think identity is. Next. There's user identity. So here's a bunch of standards around user identity. Next slide. Whole bunch of things around device identity. Next slide. And lots of things around workload identity. Next slide.
We're going to swap slides on you right now. Sorry.
Oh.
That's why it's a complicated problem. Like we talked about, right?
Just to emphasize the complexity.
Next slide.
There we go.
All right.
So identity is a part of many systems, and many people implement it, think they know what identity is, and they do in a particular context. I often use the analogy that identity is like an elephant, but most people are looking at a leg or a trunk, and they think they describe the thing, and some of them are looking at a leg, some are thinking of the trunk, but they think they're actually talking about the same thing because it seems the same, but they're actually quite different. And like, I just can't read there. Like my eyes are so bad. This is horrible. So, you know, people don't need to be experts, but they need to have a common vocabulary around what it is.
All right. All right.
It's okay. I'll guess what I'm talking about. But there's not a common vocabulary, right? So as an example, the party that gets some identity statement might be the client, might be a relying party, might be a service provider, might be a verifier, right? People use different terms for essentially what's the same thing, and it can be very confusing to somebody that doesn't have deep knowledge around what it is. And you know, what you would ask, why don't we have a common vocabulary? Well, it's because these things are created in different standards organizations, and everybody's coming up from their particular problem space around what do they need to solve, and so they make up words that make sense for them. And so each frames identity in their context. Next slide. So we're thinking maybe the first thing we should do before we get a bunch of people talking about identity, that we should get a lay of the land, or what are the terms that are used and what does everybody mean by them. So the goal wouldn't be to go and define the terms. It would be grab all the existing terms, put them together, and, you know, on something like relying party, see also, you know, service provider and verifier and client, etc. And then the next thing could be, you know, understanding like what's all the work happening in IETF, and maybe some of the other SDOs, and maybe creating some tutorials. I made the first item here, and other people made the second and third item. So if you have questions on those, I might pull somebody else. But I think and then of course, the call to action is to subscribe if you care about this. Yeah, to identity-discuss at IAB.
Someone made the first bullet, someone made the second two bullets, and the two of us sitting here at the table can't figure out how to get whatever the latest slides to present. So it's identity discuss, not who dis.
Identity-discuss, right? Identity-discuss?
Yeah. Identity-discuss.
At IAB, yeah, the last half of the address is correct. Okay.
Identity stuff is hard, very hard. And there was a comment in chat that there's a 404 on that identity discuss list. I just pulled it up. I did not get it, but I will put it in chat.
I subscribed to it earlier, so it worked 20 minutes ago.
It's the archives that are 404,
Oh,
not the subscription link.
understood. I think the list may have gotten created in.
It got
last
created this
X number of
morning,
minutes.
and the archives won't create until the job runs at midnight tonight or whatever, but the archives will show up sometime soon.
The proceedings will have the correct slides. We promise. Yes.
Hey, Sean Turner. Yeah, we'll figure out the right mailing list. I just wanted to say that if you got a vocabulary document for this identity, there was a lot of it in security. There is a security glossary already, so feel free to peruse that first if you've already been noticed. It's RFC 4949. It's loved and it's hated, but there's some stuff there. Take it as you see fit.
Great.
Paul.
Paul Hoffman, document author for other vocabularies. I can't tell you how helpful this will be for you to have a vocabulary document early on. The whole scene changed within the DNS world once we started nailing down some of these things, because what we found is definitions in RFCs that had been well established were wrong. We're now on the third version of the document, and we're still getting the, oh wait, we've been wrong even past the last two. It will really help. So I would say absolutely focus on that before all the fun work.
Great, thank you. Love to tap into your experience on maintaining and creating something like this too.
Bob's on the mic.
I'd almost say the exact opposite. You're getting ready to open up a bomb, and get your Kevlar suit on, as people say that that's not how we use that word, and we want our way. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years to try to straighten this out, and it's definitely needed. But it's like, this is worse than Belevins Here Be Dragons.
This isn't my first rodeo trying to solve this particular problem. You may have noted that I was very careful that we're not defining anything. We're taking existing definitions and putting them all together. Because when you try to define anything in the space, I've been in like huge mail list discussions and blown literally 3 days of conference time trying to describe what identity is. So I have a whole bunch of scars from having done this before that hopefully I will only get a couple of new ones.
So Philip is next, but before that, I was going to interject to invite anyone from the IAB oversight to talk about, is there anything that would be helpful to hear at the mic line, since we're in the beginning of talking about an IAB program, which is, again, the substance of kind of the conversation, not necessarily, I think, talking about the specifics of how some of the artifacts might look like or the drafts. This is about roughly, and I'm going to get this wrong since I've never personally spun up an IAB program. This is about almost like a chartering like kind of exercise, because this is proposed. This may not necessarily happen without community input.
Yeah, just to clarify, these are some ideas around what we could do if we were going to do anything. So,
yeah, I'd like to agree with Bob, only to say that he's really understating the scope of the problem here. I've had a bit to do with some technologies that are called identity. And I have not the slightest idea what identity is, and I'm pretty damn sure nobody else does. I think it's one of those shibboleths that everybody just chatters at people. What I would suggest you do instead is focus on actual problems as they affect the end user. Because many of the problems that when people are talking about identity, what they really mean is selling my private data to advertisers. And that's their problem, not my problem. I just want to get to a website. I just want to be able to add my air miles to my hotel booking. I don't want to be profiled, cataloged, debriefed, numbered. And so I think that we should focus it on what the user will benefit from, not from what corporate will.
Thanks, Philip. Wes?
As one little piece of feedback, I would strive that identity is not one of the words in the vocabulary.
Wes Herdeker, ISI, and specifically, Roman, you called me up, IAB member as well.
Please.
You know, a lot of the times for hard problems like this, our goal is not to find a solution, right? IAB programs exist to think of where do we go, right? There is a smorgasbord of stuff out there with a lot of different things to consider. Can we find a forward path out of this? Can we find at least some common ground and a definition to serve as a basis for future work, not because we're going to solve it here? In a similar vein, you know, there's some confusion sometimes between an IRTF program and an IAB program because we have a common result. How can we come to some place that we can transition this into possibly future IETF work and IETF standards and RFCs that will be beneficial when we don't feel like we have a starting place today? So from the IAB perspective, that's what I want. I assume Colin agrees, right? Yes. So that's what we want. Where do we go?
Good. Thanks, Wes. AJ, you're on the mic.
AJ Stein, NIST. I know there was something that was going on with the slides, so I'm sure this is going to be contentious because I'm going to ask it anyway since it's a fun topic for everyone. Is this human identities or maybe not human identities? Because there's like an older slide version on this. You can... I'm not trying to stir
you know, it's a great question, and it's been some confusion. And I mean, honestly, like, I think the human got put in. We had thought about initially scoping it to just being human in some of the early proposals, or end user sort of style ones, and then we decided not to do that and open it up. But you know, we still had this cool acronym, so really it was in there because it made a cool acronym. There's not a good reason. So we need to get the feedback from the community of what they want it to be, and obviously, you know, even if we just did a specific type of identity, we'd still be boiling several large oceans, and doing all types of identities is like even larger. So that's one of the things we're looking feedback on, is like, you know, where do people want this scoped? I think that right now, most of the feedback we've gotten is to certainly expand it beyond just human identities. Cool, thanks.
So Colin, just to make sure I got it exactly right, the community can have anything they want in this program as long as we can keep the name, right?
They can shoot the name too. They can have anything they want.
Okay, I think that drains the queue. Perfect. So thank you. Thanks for bringing this. And again, this is part of our attempt when we see something that's cross-cutting across the SEC area to highlight this. We think identity touches almost everything we do in security. So please do provide the feedback on identitydiscuss@ietf.org. It's what's going to be what's in the proceedings, all right? Like I'm going to stop talking now, all right?
Please save us with any other business.
He's handling the mic from now on. I'm done.
Bob Moskowitz, I opened a point earlier about the ASCON cipher. And I think it's important that we do look at all our work groups now. And I kind of zing TLS is maybe the biggest challenge because of the key derivation function that a sponge function provides us, which is so different from how we've done key derivation functions using the classic hashes with Hugo's wonderful work with HMAC and HKDF. So how we're going to do that, if we're going to be doing anything, or what we're going to do, and then also the signature, the rest of it. So I'm very interested in this and would like very much to chip in wherever I can on it. But I do want to make this change across the board so that I can get rid of all that other code out of the small devices that I possibly can.
Hey, Sean Turner is TLS Working Group Chair. Don't bring us crypto. That's the CFRG.
It's CFRG, except that TLS uses it in its handshake. So It was CFRG then changed TLS to be determined. Yes.
I'm not allowed to talk in the mic, Paul. It's going to be say the wrong thing.
Okay, so anyone else? If not, then enjoy your coffee break.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your IETF week.
Holding himself, right? Not us.
Hello, how are you? That's very good. Take them off.